This story begins in 2020 when the body of 22-year-old Marilyn Lescos was found. She had been stabbed multiple times. The news spread quickly and so did the anger. People across Canada started asking how something like this could happen and why no one seemed to stop it. Marilyn was born in 1997 to Corinne Levesque and Francois Goulet. Her parents separated not long after she was born. The people who knew her described her the same way. Again and again, outgoing, easy to talk to, the type of person who made others feel comfortable without trying. She was originally from Chicoutimi. Growing up, she spent some time with her mother and some time in foster care. Chicoutimi is one of 3 municipalities that make up the Saguenay metropolitan area in Quebec. When Marilyn turned 17, she moved to Quebec City. After a breakup with a boyfriend, she eventually returned to Chicoutimi, but she didn't settle in just one place. From that point on, she was constantly traveling back and forth between Chicoutimi and Quebec City, usually 2 or 3 times a week for work. She didn't have a driver's license yet, so she depended on buses or carpool rides to get around. By early 2020, Marilyn was living in Chicoutimi with her new boyfriend, Gabriel Truchon. The two cities were about 130 miles apart, but according to Gabriel, Marilyn was trying to build something steady. She was talking seriously about her future and was considering studying architecture. She had plans. She was thinking long-term. Then came January 2020. Marilyn was in Quebec City for work and Gabriel stayed behind in Chicoutimi. Around 9 p.m., he started to worry. He couldn't reach her. Calls went unanswered. Texts didn't go through. After trying again and again, he began messaging her coworkers, asking if anyone had seen or heard from her. That's when his phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. When he answered, the person on the line identified himself as a police officer. He told Gabriel that Marilyn had been found dead. Later, forensic experts affirmed that she had been stabbed more than 50 times. To understand how this happened, you have to go back 17 years. In 2003, Chantal Deschaines was working as a bartender at a hotel in Quebec. She was 32 years old and a mother of 2 girls, ages 10 and 6. She had been separated from their father for several years. Around the same time, a 36-year-old man named Eustachio Galassi was also working at the hotel. His job involved overseeing guest meals. Not long after they met, Chantal and Eustachio began a relationship. It moved quickly and it was intense. And that relationship would eventually set off a chain of events no one could undo. As for Eustachio, he had been married to Joan Lefrant since 1996. Together, they had 3 children. Their relationship, though, was far from stable. During arguments, Eustachio could lose his temper. On more than one occasion, he punched holes in the walls of their home. There was also an incident while they were traveling through Ottawa when he attacked Joan. He was arrested and spent 7 days in jail. Even so, Joan later said she never felt afraid of him. She described him as a good father, the one who wasn't home much because of the long hours his job demanded. According to her, the violence and verbal outbursts didn't make her fear him. Things shifted when Eustachio began a relationship with Chantal Deschaines. He left Joan and their 3 children and moved in with Chantal. The relationship moved fast. Before long, they were married. At first, life together seemed to Eustachio got along well with Chantal's 2 daughters, and the family spent weekends going to the movies, the ice rink, and other places around town. From the outside, it looked like a fresh start, but it didn't last. Just as quickly as things had come together, the relationship began to strain. Around that same time, Eustachio was working more than 60 hours a week. He told his supervisors he planned to quit by December 31st, 2004, saying he couldn't handle the pressure anymore. What he didn't talk about were the problems at home. By then, the relationship between Eustachio Gaze and Chantal Deschaines had grown tense and complicated. Some people described him as extremely jealous. Others said the possessiveness went both ways and that the arguments were frequent. Friends recalled that Eustachio would sometimes raise his voice, but they said they never saw him physically assault Chantal. They did, however, say that during arguments, Chantal could insult him or even slap him. All of that tension came to a head on October 21st, 2004. That morning, Eustachio and Chantal returned home after working a night shift at the hotel. Chantal's 2 daughters were still asleep. They had spent the night with their babysitter Nihan, who stayed over whenever Chantal worked nights. From what she heard that morning, Joni could tell the couple had argued during she left the house around 7:15 a.m. The girls were expected to leave for school around 8. Before heading out, they went to say goodbye to their mother. Chantal was in the bedroom with Eustachio. That was the last time anyone saw her alive. At 1:29 p.m. Eustachio arrived at the home of his ex-wife, Joan Lafrance. He brought with him all of the cash savings he had. While he was there, he called the police and told them he had killed Chantal. 10 minutes later, at 1:39 p.m., officers arrived at Jonah's house. Eustachio repeated his confession and surrendered without resisting. He also urged police to get to Chantal's home as quickly as possible before her daughters returned from school and discovered their mother. Around the same time, officers entered Chantal Deschen's home. They found her on the bed in her bedroom, covered in blood. Nearby were 2 knives stained with blood and a hammer with a broken handle. An autopsy later confirmed that she had been killed by multiple blows from the hammer, along with several stab wounds. The force of the attack was so severe that the hammer's handle had snapped in half. In 2006, a jury found Eustachio Gallus guilty of second-degree murder. He admitted that he killed Chantal after she told him she wanted to leave the relationship. He was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole for 15 years. This wasn't the first time he had been violent. Back in 1997, he had served 7 days in jail for assaulting his first wife, Joan. In 2004, he murdered his second wife, Chantal. Looking at that history, the pattern was clear. Violence against women followed him through his adult life. Still, in March 2019, after serving the minimum required time, the parole board decided his risk of reoffending was low enough to release him. As part of his parole conditions, Gallus was allowed limited, supervised contact with women, but no romantic relationships. His parole officer laid out specific rules about what was and wasn't allowed. One part of that plan permitted him to visit an erotic massage parlor once a month to address his sexual needs. Dating, however, was strictly forbidden. He was also required to follow a curfew from 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. unless he was attending an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. But those limits didn't hold for long. Instead of visiting the massage parlor once a month, he began going several times a week. His ability or willingness to control himself was already slipping, and this was only months after his release in March 2019. By June of that same year, during one of his visits to an erotic massage parlor, 51-year-old Eustachio met 22-year-old Marilyn Leves, who worked. Most of Marilyn's family knew she supported herself through intimate work. She didn't talk about it often, and when she did, she usually made a joke out of it or brushed past the subject. People close to her described her as sensitive, and over time she became more guarded about sharing details of what she did for a living. Her relatives believed that part of her wanted to leave that line of work, but the money made it hard. In just a couple of hours, she could earn what a minimum wage job might pay in 2 weeks. Exactly how Marilyn ended up in sex work isn't entirely clear. What is clear is that she had a difficult childhood and spent years moving through foster homes. Her boyfriend and close friends knew where she worked and what her job involved. According to one friend, she wasn't proud of it, but she wasn't ashamed either. She talked about it honestly. Her boyfriend didn't object to the work, in large part because she was based in Quebec City, about 100 miles from where they lived. By then, Eustachio had very little real supervision. He began visiting the massage parlor frequently. Despite presenting himself to the parole board as someone who had changed, his behavior suggested otherwise. On several occasions, he became aggressive toward female employees, and eventually he was banned from the establishment. None of the workers knew he was a convicted murderer, or that he had spent years in prison for killing his wife. By late summer of 2019, after reports that he had assaulted multiple women, the parole board barred him from entering any erotic massage businesses at all. Violating that condition would have sent him back to prison, but by that point, Eustachio had grown attached to Marilyn and didn't want to stop seeing her. So he found another way. He offered her $300 Canadian to meet him at a hotel instead. She agreed. It was the first time they had met outside the massage parlor, and nothing out of the ordinary happened. After that, Eustachio's attachment to Marilyn deepened. He began opening up to her, sharing personal thoughts and emotions. He told her that he missed his wife and that he had spent 15 years grieving her. What he never told her was that he was the one who had killed his wife. Not long after, Eustachio Gallus began convincing himself that Marilyn was pulling a. He felt the connection slipping, and that fed his anxiety and jealousy. He fixated on the idea that she was rejecting him. He arranged another hotel meeting for January 20, 2020. Marilyn told her boyfriend she didn't like seeing clients in hotels. She felt safer working in massage parlors where security staff were around and could step in if something went wrong. This time, though, Eustachio offered her $2,000 Canadian. The amount was high enough that she agreed to meet him at the hotel again. Around 5 p.m., Eustachio and Marilyn were seen together at the hotel restaurant in southwestern Quebec. After dinner, at about 8:30 p.m., they went up to their room. At 11:35 p.m., Eustachio walked into a police station and confessed to murder, just as he had done years earlier in 2004. Officers rushed to the hotel, hoping Marilyn might still be alive. By the time they arrived, she was already dead. An autopsy later revealed 57 stab wounds. Investigators learned that after the killing, Eustachio spent roughly 2 hours at a bar before turning himself in. During that time, he disposed of the knife and Marilyn's phone. The violence itself was devastating, but what stunned the public even more was who had committed it. A man already convicted of murdering a woman, released on parole and able to take another life. People demanded answers. Canada's public safety minister at the time, Bill Blair, offered condolences to Marilyn's family and said her death could have been prevented. Quebec's Justice Minister, Sonia Labelle, also questioned how someone with Eustachio's history had been granted parole in the first place. She raised concerns about whether those supervising him had the training needed to properly assess risk, and she called on Bill Blair to investigate. Another commission was formed to review the parole board's decisions. That review identified multiple failures in how Eustachio's case had been handled, including serious gaps in case management and in the level of supervision he received. The head of the Correctional Service of Canada called Marilyn's death a terrible tragedy, one that should never have happened. He said both the Correctional Service and the parole board would take real steps to make sure nothing like this happened again. But beyond the statements, very little changed. No one faced serious discipline. A few parole board members were reassigned, others were sent for additional training. On paper, it looked like action. In reality, it didn't change the outcome. A young woman was dead, and there was no way to bring Marilyn back. The hope, at least, is that her death forces people in positions of authority to think more carefully about the consequences of the decisions they make. Marilyn's family later reached a settlement with the government that included compensation for her death. The agreement prevented a lawsuit from moving forward, and the amount paid was never made public. There were also people who criticized Marilyn because of the work she did. That criticism missed the point. Her job had nothing to do with the system failures that allowed a dangerous man to walk free. At first, Eustachio was charged with second-degree murder. Once investigators discovered that he had purchased the knife in advance and planned the attack, the charge was upgraded to first-degree murder. He eventually pleaded guilty and admitted the killing was premeditated. At his sentencing in February 2020, prosecutors told the court that Eustachio had developed feelings for Marilyn and became jealous when he realized she viewed their meetings strictly as work. That jealousy was identified as the motive. On February 27, 51-year-old Eustachio Gallesi was sentenced to life in prison. This time, the rules are different. He won't be eligible to apply for parole after 15 years as he was before. He'll have to wait 25 years. Whether he will ever be released again at age 76 is a question that remains unanswered. Cases like this leave a lot of questions. What could have been done differently? Could anything have prevented it?